Hi everyone, welcome to Wild Voices Online. We'll get started in a few moments. While we wait for people to log in and join us, your question for today that you can answer for us, just while we're waiting for fun, is which of these forest animals do you like best? Deer, brown bear, rabbit, squirrel, fox, or moose? Animals that you might find in the forest. Which one's your favorite? If you have to pick one. Okay, welcome to those who have just joined us. We will get started with Wild Voices Online in a few moments, but while we're waiting, we just have a question up here for fun that you can answer while we wait. Of which of these forest animals do you like best? Our options are deer, brown bear, rabbit, squirrel, fox, or moose. You can let us know which one of those do you like the best. Okay, we'll get started in just a few more moments. For those who have just joined us, while we're waiting for people to log in, just a question up there for fun if you want to answer of which of these forest animals do you like best. I think we'll get started in about 10 more seconds. So if you haven't answered the question already, go ahead. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what you said. Today, the top pick was fox. For sure, they're a pretty cool animal. And then there's someone out there who likes every single one of those animals. But we'll get started for today. So my name is Christine. I work for the Columbia Basin Environmental Education Network. We did some learning programs just like this one in May and June. There's actually only one more left after this one. That's tomorrow. And you can go check it out at cbeen.ca/wildvoicesonline. There's also all of the recordings of the sessions that already happened. So if you missed one or you want to watch it again, you can go to cbeen.ca/wildvoicesonline. And we have links to all the videos there and all of the resources that the educators shared that you could try for afterwards. For how this session today will work, you are muted, which means we can't see or hear you. So if you want to ask a question or tell us something, you can click the little speech bubble, looks like this, and you can type your question to us. And your questions will only be seen by me and today's presenter. But please be patient with your questions. There's lots more of you than there are of us, so just send your question once. We'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can, but sometimes, just like in the classroom, we might not have time for all of them. I'll actually ask your questions for you. So I'll wait until there's a good time to ask them. Our presenter will do their presentation, and then we'll take some question breaks at a good time. Today also our presenter will be asking you some questions to see if you know the answer. And you can just call them out where you are at home or at school. Or if you want to, you can also type your answer into the chat. If you want to do that and you know how to use the chat, go ahead and you can type your answers to us when she asks you one of the questions. And then just one last thing before we get started. I just want to know what grade you are in, students who are joining us today. What grade are you in? I added preschool as an option for today. Are you in preschool, kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or grade 7 and up? You can let us know. Okay, thanks. I can see lots of you have answered already. I'll give it 5 more seconds from here for you to let us know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see who's joining us today.
Wow.
Actually pretty equally spread with lots of people in kindergarten, grade 2, 3, 4. There's some folks joining us in grade 5 today. Welcome everyone. we will get started. So our presenter for today is Rita. She's joining us from Nelson, and she's going to be talking to us about biodiversity, which is a great word about all the different things living in nature. So I'll pass it over to Rita to get started.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Christine, and thank you, Christine, and every cbeen for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here and sharing some of the things I love in nature with you. I'm just going to share my screen, and that'll get our slideshow started. So, Christine, is that showing properly?
Yep, okay. We are seeing your screen.
Okay, so the topic that the name I chose for my presentation is the biodiversity around us. So that's talking about all the beautiful things, all the amazing things that are in this region, the West Kootenays, in nature around us. But just to start, I'll just quickly say, so my name is Rita Corcoran, and I'm the teacher for the Heartwood Nature School. And I love being outdoors and learning about all the amazing things that are going on in the natural world. And I'm really excited to be here today and share a bit of that with you. So when we talk about the word biodiversity, it means all the many different types of things we have here in the West Kootenays. And if we look on this map of British Columbia, you can see the darker green portion on the side of our province. So if you know what the lakes are, you'll see that we live in this area, and this is actually an inland rainforest. So where we live in a rainforest, which is so cool. And what that means too is that we have a lot of biodiversity. We have many different types of natural animals and plants that live in this area. So it's a really exciting and beautiful place for us to live. There's so many different things to see where we are, and they're so cool, like the sturgeon and beautiful birds, red-winged blackbird, and forests and animals and flowers. I can't talk about everything today here in this amazing place, so I chose some certain things to go over. And one thing that I can say is, or one way of dividing what we're talking about is, I can divide the forest sort of generally if I divide them into the wetter forest, that's the picture on the top left, or the drier forest, that's the picture on the bottom right. So to begin my presentation, I'm going to tell a story that I made up. Well, actually, I learned parts of these stories from someone else. I read it and heard it, and then I put it together and made it into one big story and added some things. And this story is just a way of introducing 4 of the tree species that are in our area. 2 are from the wetter forest and 2 are from the drier forest. And when you listen to the story, I made it up, and in it, it's make-believe. So there are animals that can talk and trees that can talk and move around. So of course this doesn't happen in real life, but just for the sake of the story, that's what's going to happen. So I'll just begin. In the beginning of time, there was great Mama Grizzly, and she was working with the trees, helping them to get set up, because that's what mamas do, they help. Great Mama Grizzly decided to visit the different trees, and she looked around at the forest, and at first she noticed a flickering of light, and it looked like maybe a fire had started. But Mama Grizzly wasn't worried, because fires are, if they're a small fire, they're a natural thing that can happen if there has been a lightning strike. And the night before there had been a storm and there was a lightning strike. So Mama Grizzly knew that this was a natural part of the forest cycle, and she wasn't worried, but she wanted to go closer and to see what was going on. When Mama Grizzly got closer to the fire and that part of the forest, she noticed a little sweet North American deer mouse was scared and shivering and quivering because of the fire. And the little deer mouse yelled out, "Oh, Mama Grizzly, help me. I'm frightened by the fire. Please help me and all my mice friends." And just as the mice was calling out for help, Douglas Fir called out. Douglas fir called out in a very deep voice and said, "Don't worry, little deer mouse. I have thick bark and high branches. Climb my tree and you will be safe." "Oh, thank you. Thank you," said the mouse. And the mouse called all the other little deer mice, and they ran up the trunk of the Douglas fir and onto the branches. And the mice were so scared that they tucked their heads and dug their heads right into the cones of the Douglas fir tree. And they hid in there. And Mama Grizzly saw that the Douglas fir was so kind to help the mice, and saw what the mice had done in hiding inside the cone, that she said that from this day forward, Douglas fir, your cones will show your kindness that you gave the mice when you let them hide in your cones. And so now if you look at that cone hanging off the branch, the Douglas fir cone, you can see it looks like little mice legs and tails are peeking out all over the cone with their heads buried inside the cone. So this is a way of being able to tell that it's a Douglas fir tree. It has cones where the mice are hiding in the cones. Meanwhile, as the fire was burning, it wasn't burning too hot or too high. Mama Grizzly noticed that Ponderosa Pine was standing tall right beside the fire, singing happily. And Mama Grizzly asked, "Why are you so happy?" And Ponderosa Pine answered, "I too have high branches, and the flames can't reach me up to my branches, and my bark is so thick that the fire doesn't hurt me at all. I love fire." So Mama Grizzly decided that the Ponderosa Pine would live closely with the fire, and every so often a small or medium fire would burn through the Ponderosa Pine forest, and it would clear the ground and enrich the soil and make space for a little Ponderosa Pine seedling to grow, as you can see in this picture. So that's what the Ponderosa Pine needs: the ground to be cleared with the fire. It clears the bottom story and enriches the soil so the little seedlings can grow. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest where it was a little wetter, some trees had gathered to be awarded their cones from Mama Grizzly. And some forest friends, we can see deer, white-tailed deer, and a snowshoe hare, they realized that Hemlock, their friend Hemlock, wasn't there at the gathering. And so they decided they wanted to help Hemlock. So while Mama Grizzly was talking to the other trees, Snowshoe Hare stayed there to make sure that some cones were left and not all of them were given out, and Deer ran as fast as he could to find Hemlock. So he ran into the forest and found Hemlock and said, wake up, you need to come now. Mama Grizzly is giving out cones." And Hemlock, her head still droopy with sleep, stumbled to the gathering just in time to be awarded a small cone, one of the last cones that Mama Grizzly had left. So you can see in this picture, the small cones are from Hemlock, for Hemlock. "Oh," Hemlock said, her head still droopy, "at least I got one, even though it's pretty small." And so Hemlock's head was droopy like that. And Hemlock, if you look around in the forest, you'll always see their heads drooping to the side like they're still sleepy, that they are just waking up. But just as Hemlock was talking about her cones, Sweet Cedar spoke up and said, "Don't worry, Hemlock, I haven't got my cone yet either, and I don't mind taking a small cone like you, and I'll stay close by your side to keep you company in the forest." So Mama Grizzly decided that Cedar and Hemlock would be able to stay together because Sweet Cedar was so kind in helping out Hemlock and keeping her company. And that's why today in the forest, you'll see the Cedar and Hemlock live close together in the same forest. So that's the end of my story. And I introduced 4 different trees in that story. And what I have now are a few questions for you that I will ask, and Christine has the questions ready. So there's 3 questions I'm going to ask, and on the computer you can choose your answer to these questions. And the first question I have is, what animal was hiding in the Douglas fir cone? What animal?
Okay, so there's the question there. What animal was hiding in the Douglas fir cone? Was it a mouse, deer, or fox? You can let us know which one you think it is. Okay, great. I can see that most of you have chosen. I'll give it 5 more seconds if you haven't chosen already. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what you said. All right.
Oh my
The
goodness,
mouse.
you are right. It was the mice that are hiding in the Douglas fir cones. When you're in the forest, if you look at a cone and you see the little mice legs and tail hanging out, peeking out, you'll know it's a Douglas fir tree. Okay, so that was awesome. The next question I have is, what tree is sleepy with the droopy top? Always has their head droopy to the side. And you have 3 choices there. Was the tree hemlock, larch, or cottonwood?
Okay, great. I can see lots of people have chosen which one they think it is. I'll give you 5 more seconds from here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what you said. We
Yes,
all said hemlock.
everyone knows the hemlock. That's fantastic. Okay, my last question that I have is, what forest friends helped hemlock in the story? What forest friends helped? Was it snake and butterfly, cougar and hawk, or deer and hare?
Okay, great. I can see most of us have chosen. I'll give you 5 more seconds from here to let us know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We said deer and hare.
You got it. Fantastic. Yep, those were the ones. Okay, so that's the end of that story, and it's the end of my stories that I'm going to be telling that I made up. So what I'm going to talk about next is, just going back to here, what I'm going to talk about next is, actually I was going to go through and show you the answers, but you got them. That was the Forest Friends one. What I want to talk about is birds and bird calls, because that's one way when you're out in the forest, you'll always be hearing birds calling out. And it's a great way of being able to tell what's going on in the forest. And if you listen closely, you'll be able to start to distinguish between the different bird calls, and you'll know what's going on around you. And it's a fun way to explore outside. So I wanted to do a little bit of that with you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a slide that has 2 birds on it. And then I'm going to play a recording of the song of one of the birds. And you're going to try to guess which bird's song am I playing? Is it the first bird or the second one? And you may know all the birds on the picture, you may not, but I'm going to tell you what they are. And when you guess these ones, you can just call it out. And through the magic of our cbeen webinar, I'm going to be able to hear you when you call out. So I'm going to start with the first slide. And we see 2 birds here, and I'm guessing that you'll know what they are. Everyone knows the red robin there on the right, and that's a type of owl. I'll talk a bit more about that. That's the first bird on the left. And I'm going to play their song, one of their songs. So call out, which bird do you think that is? Okay, and I'm going to show you. You're right, it is the barred owl. That is a pretty classic owl call. You can see the barred owl has those stripes, like those bars of color on their feathers. And some people think that the call sounds like the owl calling out, who cooks for who? Who cooks for who? So that's a way of remembering what the barred owl's call. An American robin, I'll just do the call because it's probably a call you have heard before, a song, but may not have realized that it was the robins. So that's sort of a cheerful spring song that we hear. And the next 2 birds we have, You might know, maybe you know both of them, but the first one is a chickadee and the second one is a junco, and they're both pretty common birds. The chickadee we can see around houses and in the forest, and the junco, you can often see them, they come in the springtime, so I consider them a spring bird. I'm gonna play one of the songs and you call out which bird is it, the chickadee or the junco? You're right. It's the black-capped chickadee calling out. And when the chickadee calls, they make the sound of their name, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. And that call that they're giving there, it's actually not considered one of their songs. It's considered an alarm call. So the chickadees make that call when they're trying to communicate something to the other chickadees in their group, because chickadees go around in groups and flocks together often. So when they're calling out, it's actually like a warning, and the more DDDs in the call means the bigger the threat. So for instance, if you were outside and your cat was out there, the chickadee may be calling out chickadee dee 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 because they want to let other chickadees know that there is a threat nearby. Right now, the chickadee call you might be hearing is their mating call, which is which some people say sounds like cheeseburger, cheeseburger, and they're calling out to try to find a mate. The dark-eyed junco has a pretty distinct call, and you may be hearing this in the springtime. The junco you also can recognize when they're flying away. You see two distinct white bars on their tails when they're flying away. Okay. So the next slide are two birds that I'm sure you've seen before. So if you want to call out what they are, I'm sure you know what they are. That's right. They're a crow is the first one and a raven is the second one. Now, sometimes people think that these are the same species, the same type of bird. They look similar because they actually are related. They're in the same bird family, the Corvidae family. So they are related, but they are different. And one way of telling the difference between the two is if you look at the tail, you can see the crow, the one on the right, or sorry, the left, the first one, has a straight tail. And the raven's tail feathers are rounded. And you can see that when they're flying too. You'll see those rounded tails for the raven and the straight one for the crow. The raven is a bigger bird and has a bigger beak than the crow. And the ravens are usually in singles or pairs, whereas the crows are in the big flocks. So I'm gonna do a call and you tell me, is this a raven or a crow? So call out your answer. And that sound is a raven, the common raven. They have more of that deep guttural croaking sound. Another way of identifying the ravens is that they will be often soaring in the air, whereas a crow is flapping their wings. And the crow sound is more like this. So they're doing more of the caw, caw, caw. The next two birds are two common birds, and they both have really distinct calls and sounds, and you have probably heard both of them. One is the nuthatch you hear more in the forest, and the song sparrow, you'll hear them around your yard and down by water as well. But I'm going to play, and you call out which one is it. Is it the song sparrow, the first bird, or the nuthatch, the second one? I really like this bird, and that's the call of the red-breasted nuthatch. And this is a pretty small bird, but when you're walking through the forest, that call they do is so loud that I'm sure you've heard it before, and it's an easy one to hear when you're walking in the forest. And one thing I just wanted to say about the nuthatches, they're kind of like a feisty little bird. They do something to protect. They're very protective of their nest. They'll make a nest in a tree cavity. So they'll hollow out an area of a tree, or they'll go into a hole that's already there. And they take the resin, the sticky part from the trees that are on the outside, the sap, and they'll take it in their beak and they'll spread it all around the opening of the hole. And the reason they do that is they're trying to stop predators from getting into the nests that they make. The song sparrow has a really pretty song, and it sounds like they're just singing their heart out when they sing. It's quite loud as well. So the next two birds that I'm going to talk about, these are both birds that you will hear, and most likely you'll hear them before you see them. You'll hear them in the forest, and they both have really beautiful sounds. So I'm going to play them for you. So which one is it? Is it the first one? And maybe you know the name of this bird, maybe you don't. This is the Pacific wren, and it's a quite small little bird with their tail peeping up. And the other bird is a cousin of the robin. It's in the same family as the robin. This is a thrush. This is a Swanson's thrush. So which bird is it? So that's quite a loud call. So call it out. Which one is it? The wren or the thrush? And the answer is, that is the Pacific wren. And there's also a small little bird with a big loud voice, and it's a very cheerful sounding song, and you can hear them all winter long, these Pacific wrens. It's a beautiful sound to hear in the forest, especially in the colder, wetter months. The Swanson's thrush, I love this bird call, and they arrive here in summer, and you'll hear their call. To me, it means when I hear this call, I think summer is here. It's yes, this is summer. And I heard these birds calling out just last week, and I was so excited to hear them. It's almost like a magical sound. So that's the sound of the Swanson's thrush, and to me, it's the beautiful, magical summer bird sound. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to review those calls, because it's kind of, you're just hearing it once. It's easier maybe to remember if you hear it a second time. So I'm just going to go through the slides again. I'm going to play the calls of just one of the ones in the pair, and you call out which one it was. I'm going to go through that again. So that is the barred owl, you're right. And the next one, call it out, chickadee or junco? You're right, that is a chickadee. Okay, this one can be tricky. Which one is it? That is the raven. The crow does more of a caw. Okay, which one is it of these two, the song sparrow or the nuthatch? Song sparrow or nuthatch? You're right, that's the feisty little nuthatch. The red-breasted nuthatch is calling out. And the last one, which one is it? The first bird is the Pacific wren, or the second bird, the Swanson's thrush? Excellent. You're right, that's the Pacific wren, and that's a call that you can hear all year round. Christine, I see a bunch of those chat questions in the chat, or was it people putting answers in there? I'm just seeing.
Yeah, there was lots of people putting answers in the chat. There was one question that came through though.
Okay.
Are the plants in the West Kootenay much different from the East Kootenay?
That's a great question. And there are quite a few differences. And I think the sort of overall general difference between West Kootenay and East Kootenay is that we have more rain, we're wetter forests. So in the East Kootenays, I don't know the East Kootenays as, I have only visited there a few times. I don't know them as well, but I know that it's a drier forest. So you might answer this, Christine. Are there the ponderosa pine in the East Kootenays? I'm guessing they're drier. I think they have lodgepole pines in the East Kootenay is the more of the forest type.
Yeah, it's quite a bit drier in the East Kootenay. I live in Creston, so I'm kind of in between. And in Creston here, we're still part of the interior rainforest, though it's noticeably quite a bit drier than a place like Nelson, which has quite a lot more moisture. And you can really notice it in the trees that live around the Nelson area. They look quite like it can be a much more like it's a lot of denser forests around Nelson. Then you come out to Creston and it starts being a bit of a drier forest, but we have little pockets of these of glades of cedar trees in these sort of rainforest areas here around Creston. And then it gets drier and drier the closer you get to Cranbrook. And then if you keep going east from Cranbrook, it's quite a bit drier. And yeah, the forests look very different there than how they do in the West Kootenay.
Still a lot of diversity in the East Kootenays, a lot of diversity for sure. Yeah. And the next part that I'm going to be talking about, the animals, I think that most of these animals would also be in the East Kootenays as well. So that's what I wanted to move on to, but great question. Thank you for asking that. And the next section I wanted to talk about is just go over some of the different animals that we have in our area. So I'm looking at, if you were to go near the water, you might see one or both or signs of either of these two animals. And I'm sure everyone knows what the bottom animal is, the beaver. And the top one is an American mink. And I included the mink in this slide because I'm thinking if you wanted to find signs of animals, it's really helpful if you look for their tracks and learn to identify what track goes with what animal, because often you won't see the animal. They'll be scurrying away before you see them, but they'll be leaving their tracks behind. So that's something that is, when you're out exploring nature, you'll see more of the diversity and what's around you when you start to learn how to identify the tracks. The first animal there, the American mink, you see that he or she has a fish in their mouth. And the next picture is one of the types of animals that they eat. So call it out if you know what kind of animal that is in the picture. I'm looking at the top middle picture. What is that there? That is the Pacific tree frog. You might have seen those around. And the reason I put that in there is because that is one of the animals that the mink eats. The mink only eats meat. They're what's called a carnivore, means they only eat meat. And the tracks that I really love seeing the mink tracks. They're so delicate. So I don't know if you can see that there. That's only 1 inch. Their tracks are very small and delicate, and you see their 5 little toes, and often you'll get a very distinct print from the mink. And so if you look along the edge of rivers, you might see, or lake, you might see the mink there. And in the wintertime, you can see their tracks really clearly. And looking at the beaver down below, I guess I'll ask, you can give me the answer, is the beaver carnivore? Do they eat only meat? Are they an omnivore, meaning do they eat both meat and vegetables or plants? Or are they herbivore? Do they eat plants? And so you tell me what one it is. Okay, I see some people have answered. That's fantastic. The beavers are herbivores. So they'll be chewing on different trees and tree saplings and eating the bark and the tree fibers. And one of the trees, the one I showed here, is an aspen. That's one in the area that they like to eat. And as we know, beavers make dams, and they change an area from a stream. They'll dam it up, and the area will flood, and it'll become a wetter area. And that's actually really important for the ecosystems, the changes that the beaver, they'll flood a bunch of trees and those trees will die. But what happens is it becomes a water ecosystem, and that brings in all sorts of birds and reptiles and amphibians. And it creates this diversity there. And when the beaver ends up eventually abandoning that lodge where they've dammed the river and it dries, that area that was flooded dries up, it goes back to a meadow. So it's an important part of the cycle of the different ecosystems. And if you can see, the last slide there is the print of the beaver. And those are a lot bigger than the mink prints. The front print could be around 3 inches and the back print can be even bigger than that. So the beaver prints, I always think they look kind of cool. They almost remind me of the hand of a human when I look at that. And the next slide I wanted to show you were deers. Now, in our area, we have two types of deers. We have the white-tailed deer, which I'm sure everyone has seen. And we also, the bottom picture is the mule deer. And sometimes we don't realize that there's the diversity again, that there's 2 different species of deer. And the white-tailed deer, one of the foods that they like to eat is the fiddleheads, which is the ferns when they're growing. And the white-tailed deer, a distinctive thing about them is when they're running away and they'll flash their tail and you see their big white tail sort of waving in the air. So that's a very distinct sign that it's a white-tailed deer. The mule deer, if you look closely, if you look at the size of the ears of the mule deer compared to its face, and then look up at the white-tailed deer, the mule deer has a bigger ears compared to the size of their face, and that's why their name is mule. And a way to tell them from the whitetail is that if you look at the second picture of the mule deer, so the bottom right, they have a big white patch on their backside, and their tail, they have a white tail as well, but it also has a tip of black on it. So that's how you can tell that that is a mule deer. And mule deers, they'll run and they'll do this funny thing where they'll jump and all 4 legs will rise up in the air together and they bound like that, which is pretty cool. So 2 more animals. I'm sure you know what these are. So call it out on the top. Is this a coyote or is it a wolf or is it a fox? What type of dog is that on the top picture? Is it someone's pet dog? Okay, I see people answer. This is a coyote. And what I wanted to talk about was the difference between a cat track and a dog track. If you look at the coyote print, you'll see that the 2 middle toes stick out further than the outside toes, and you'll see the claw marks. And when you see the claw marks like that and the toes, it's more sticking forward than the outside, you know that's a dog track. And a way to tell if it's a wild dog or someone's pet dog, if you look to the slide again to the right, in the snow, you see that the pattern is 2 together, 2 together, 2 together. And it's a very sort of neat pattern that gets repeated. If it was someone's domestic dog, the footprints would be all over the place and it wouldn't be this neat pattern like that. The second picture we have there is the cougar. Or if anyone knows any other names for cougar, there are other names for this animal that lives all over North America. It's also called a mountain lion or a puma or even a panther. And if you look at the tracks of a cougar, they're more rounded. So they're not sticking like too forward to the side like the dog. They are more like in a sort of an arc. And you don't see any claw marks because the cats will retract their claws in when they're walking. So you don't see typically claw marks for the cougar or cats. And if you see the track pattern there, that last picture on the bottom right, they sort of meander, the cougar will sort of meander like that. And it's really exciting to see the cougar. You're probably not going to see the cougar themselves, but you may be finding some of their tracks. And I always get excited when I see a cougar track. Now, one thing about cougars, and I'm going to be moving on to the bears next, is that if you're going to be out exploring in the wilderness or nature, it's really important to know how to stay safe. So I'm going to recommend that you join the webinar tomorrow that cbeen is giving. And that's given by WildSafe BC, and they're talking about how to stay safe in interacting with wildlife. So I highly recommend that webinar. So we're looking at, we know we have black bears here in the area, and The black bears are herbivores, or I'm sorry, omnivores, so they're eating both plants, and mostly the animal protein fiber, the protein they eat is, if you see the bottom picture here with the ants, they'll rip apart logs and they eat a lot of the ant larvae. That's how they get a lot of protein. And they eat different plants. The first plant I showed there is the skunk cabbage, the yellow flower with the big, huge green leaves. And they start eating those in the spring when they're coming out of hibernation, and that helps get their digestion going again. And the skunk cabbage is a very smelly plant. And the reason the skunk cabbage is so smelly is that it blossoms before the bees are active. And so it actually wants to make itself smell like rotting meat. So that's why it has a very stinky smell. And then the ants and flies come onto it and to lay their eggs because they think it's rotting meat. And then they crawl around in the flower and they spread the pollen. And that's how the skunk cabbage makes more skunk cabbage. And you can see also a picture there of the huckleberry, which is a big source of nutrition for the black bears. And then you'll see the print on the bottom right there. And so with the black bear, the print, you'll see all 5 toes, and it is in also in a bit of an arc there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that after we look at the next slide, which is the grizzly bear. So we have grizzly bear in the Kootenays, which is so super exciting. They're beautiful, amazing animals. We usually don't see them down where humans are, but they do occasionally come down, but mostly they're living up higher. And they actually are mostly, okay, I'm gonna actually ask this question. Do you think the grizzly bears eat half of their diet is from plants and half is from animals? Or do you think a lot more are from plants or a lot more are from meat? What do you think? Are they 50-50, half and half? Do they eat more plants than meat, or do they eat more of meat than plants? Okay, so looks like some of you answered, which is fantastic. They actually eat mostly plants. 70% of their diet is plant, which may be surprising for such a huge animal to get most of their nutrition from plants. They have the big shoulders and powerful long claws, and they'll dig up things like the glacier lily or the yellow flowers there. They eat a lot of huckleberries too and berries. We see on the bottom they do occasionally hunt some animals like this ground squirrel. And then looking at this track there, that casting of a track of a grizzly, that is 10 inches. So that is around that big, that grizzly bear track, which is quite enormous. And one distinction to know that it's a grizzly bear is the claws are quite far from the toe because their claws are so long, the tips are reaching quite far from the toes. And on the next slide, I'll show you how you tell the difference between a grizzly bear and black bear. People often think that it's just the color. A black bear is black, grizzly bear is a lighter brown, but that's not always the case. The black bears can be a brown color or lighter brown, and grizzly bears can be darker. So we know that the claws of the grizzly are quite a bit longer. We know that a grizzly has the hump on their shoulder, and their face is a different shape, the way that their snout comes out and the bridge of their brow versus the black bear comes out the snout more of like smoothly, and there's no hump on their shoulder. But truly, the way to really distinctly know if it's a black bear or a grizzly is when you look at their prints. If you see the prints there, a grizzly bear's toes are not in as much of an arc. So if you put a line across, all the toes would be above the line. If you put a line across with the black bear print, starting at the outside toe and did it straight across, that last toe would be below the line. So they're more arcing than the grizzly bear. So that's a way to tell for sure if it's a grizzly bear or a black bear. And I have on this the BearSmart, www.bearsmart.com. That's a great site that I recommend you go to look at to find out about bears. And they actually have a quiz on there where they show a whole bunch of pictures and they say, is it a grizzly bear, black bear, grizzly bear, black bear? And sometimes it is tricky to tell which one it is. So you might be surprised. I was surprised when I did the quiz that I got a few of them wrong. So it's not always so easy to tell the difference. So now I'm going to do a quiz for you, sort of review what we went over. And you can answer, Christine, you were going to put up the poll where they can answer yes or no. I'm going to ask you a question and then you answer with a yes or a no. So the first question I have, is this a beaver track? And you answer yes or no.
Okay, I see lots of people are letting us know. Is this a beaver track? Yes or no? I'll give you 5 more seconds to decide. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We mostly said yes.
Yes, fantastic. Yes, that is the beaver track. Fantastic. My next question is this a mule deer? Is this a mule deer? So remember we had the 2 types of deer, whitetail or mule. So is that a mule deer, yes or no? If you look at the shape of its size of its ears and its face and its back end, you should be able to have a good guess.
Okay, I'll give you just a few more moments to let us know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We said yes.
Yes, fantastic. That is the mule deer, which is so cool. Okay, next question. Is this a black bear? Is this a black bear?
I gave you a moment to look at it before I put the question up. Is that a black bear? Okay. Here you go. You can let us know. Yes or no, is that a black bear? Okay, 5 more seconds to let us know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We said no.
No, you're right. It's not a black bear. That's a grizzly bear. You can see the hump on it and you can see the shape of its face. One thing also I didn't add was the grizzly bear has a smaller rounded ears, but fantastic. You knew that anyway. Last question. Is this a coyote track? Is this a coyote track?
Okay, take a moment to get a good look at it. Is that a coyote track? Okay, we've looked at it for a moment. Now you can let me know what you think. Yes or no, is that a coyote track? Okay, thanks. I can see some answers coming in. 5 more seconds to let us know what you think. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what you said. We said no.
No, you're correct. It's not a coyote track. That's the cougar track, the rounded cat track with no claws. So fantastic. You know your tracks and you've been listening really well, so that's amazing. To end up here with my slides, I'm just going to quickly just go over a few things just to talk about some different animals that we have. And talking about invertebrates. So call out if you know, does invertebrate mean that there's no backbone? So call out your answer. Does invertebrate mean there's no backbone in these animals? What do you think? And you're right. Invertebrate means there's no backbone. And some of the common invertebrates we see are some butterflies. The top left one is the anise swallowtail, which is quite beautiful and has the bright colored and the tips, the back come down. And that is actually a survival strategy for the swallowtail, that when a bird goes to grab it, the swallowtail is hoping that it'll go for that brightly colored tips that hang down. And if the bird grabs that part of the swallowtail, that can break off and the swallowtail will still live to see another day. And that's what they do to protect themselves. Next to it is the caterpillar of the swallowtail, and that's a caterpillar that's very distinct. It's smooth, it's not hairy, and it has the yellow and black, which is really cool. You might see that around. The next butterfly is the mourning cloak, and that's pretty common. They typically eat willows, and they live a long time, up to a year, which is really long in butterfly life. And then the last one there is the polyphemus moth, which that also has a survival strategy. Its wings are closed, and if a predator comes to get it, it opens its wings, and then those eyes pop out, and whatever's coming to get it might think that that's an animal looking out with its eyes, and it won't get preyed upon. On the bottom there, we have one, this spruce sawyer, which is a really cool bug. It's got those super long antennas, and you might see them. They live in, their life cycle is associated with the spruce tree. The one thing is, I always think it's fun when you see them in the summer, they fly straight up and down like this, and they make a buzzing sound, and they kind of fly like as if they're not super steady, and you might see them out. The ladybug there, that's the native ladybug we have. It's called a two-spot ladybug. Sometimes it has 4 or none, but typically it just has the 2, and that's the ladybug that has always lived in the forests here. Then we have in the cave, if you were going to look under rocks or in wet places, you might see that cave cricket, or it's called a camelback, the rounded humpback. And the last one is if you're in a pond, you might see the water boatman, and its 2 arms flopping like that, swimming. It's really fun and cool. And then in our area, we have lots of amphibians and reptiles. These are super exciting to see, and you might see any of these if you look around, if you pull back again, or if you rolled up a log to look underneath. One thing I'll say is, though, you don't want to be picking any of them up, because what we have on our hands could be very harmful to them, and also they might think that we're a predator. The middle one there, on the top middle, the northern alligator lizard, and the bottom middle one, the skink, they would drop their tail if they think they're being preyed upon, hoping that the predator will eat their tail and leave them alone. And they can grow a new tail, but it takes a lot of energy for them. So we don't want to be grabbing at them and have them drop their tails. That would be sad. And we have the painted turtle, western painted turtle, the alligator lizard, the western toad, which are really cool. We see them around here. You might see a salamander, the long-toed salamander, Pacific tree frog, which is green in the picture, but it can change to brown, common garter snake, or western skink. So those are some of the amphibians and reptiles that we have in the area. So that is the end of my presentation. And what I included, it should be in an email sent to you, or I'm sending this bingo, nature bingo. I don't know why on my slide it shows the funny things in the top corner, but this is a bingo page that you can print out, and you can bring with you outside when you go exploring. And it's just a fun way of getting out there and trying to see different things outside when you go out there. And one other thing I've included was this information will also go out. These are just some basic nature guides. The first one is a very general guide, the British Columbia Nature Guide. And then the other ones are plants, birds, and tracking. And there's lots of guides out there. These are ones that I personally really like. And just encourage you that these are great ways of learning more about all the amazing things that we have in the beautiful part of the world that we live. There's so much to see and so much to learn. It's a never-ending process, and it's a really exciting and fun thing to do. So I encourage you to just get out there and enjoy yourself and stay curious and learn what you can. And we're really grateful to live in this beautiful place. Christine, I think I had, we're just coming up on the end of the hour there. I had that story to read. I'm not sure if we should do that or just do some questions, because it's getting up to a few more minutes. What do you think?
It is getting close. I did have a couple questions come in. I'm not sure how long your story would take to tell, because we only have about 5 minutes left.
I think we'll just do questions then. Yeah.
Sure. I did have an interesting question come through of, what sounds do mink and beaver make?
Oh my gosh, what sounds I actually don't know. I don't know what sounds they make. Well, we know that the beaver.
That's an interesting question.
It's a fantastic question. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And you know what? I'm going to go try to figure that out. We know that the beaver, the teeth never stop growing, right? So that the beaver has to be chewing, chewing, chewing. So I have heard a beaver, that gnawing sound when they're gnawing on the tree. And I have had a beaver when I've been crossing a log over a creek when I lived up on the coast in Bella Coola. There was a beaver living there, and it would smack its tail as a warning. So sometimes you'll hear that loud smack of the beaver tail on the water, which can be quite startling. And that's their warning sound, or their gnawing. So I know those are sounds from beaver. The mink, honestly, I don't know. And it's a great question. And I think that's a fantastic thing for you to research, and I'm going to try to answer that question myself. So thanks for a new learning opportunity.
And that's a great question, because so many animals in nature are actually very quiet. And so we don't always hear what sounds they make, especially because once people show up, a lot of animals want to hide or or go somewhere else where they feel safe, especially because us humans, we're so big and us humans are kind of loud. Often animals can hear us coming. We make a lot of sounds, and a lot of animals in our lives make a lot of sounds. Like if I think about my cats can be kind of loud sometimes. They meow lots to let me know if they want food or attention, but a lot of animals in the wild are actually really quiet. And I think minks might be one of those. I think they probably do make sounds, and I bet maybe you could try to research that and look that up, or maybe look it up with your family or get an adult to help you to look that up and see if you can find out what sounds they make. But yeah, I bet they do, but I bet they don't want to make those sounds around people so much, and I bet they might be quiet. It's interesting. I don't know. And same with beavers. I know I've heard beavers slap their tails too. They do that to warn other beavers if there might be something coming. But yeah, I'm not sure about what noises they actually make. Very good question.
And the minks also, they're diving, they go underwater. They can actually dive like 100 feet down underwater. So we might not hear sounds they make because they're underwater swimming, but yeah, fantastic question.
Okay. Another question that came in of how many bird species are there? This person actually asked in the world, which is a really big question.
Oh,
The answer is lots and lots and lots and lots.
Oh my gosh. Again, you're stumping me here. How many bird species are there? I know that in Canada, are there around 300 or 400 in Canada? I'm trying to pull this stat out. I'm guessing that's what it is. I think that's what it is. So in the world, there must be, again, a great question, over 1,000, I'm guessing, but that's a question you need to answer as well. So we need some follow-up research done here. But great question, yeah.
A lot of the questions that came in were just great curiosity questions, where we might not actually know the answer ourselves, because they're very interesting questions that you might need to go double check on. But yeah, so you're thinking that's great that you knew about how many in Canada. 300 to 400, that's a lot. So yeah, in the world there must be lots more, because that's just 300 to 400 in Canada alone. So,
and I have to double check that, but yes.
Okay, let's see. Someone was asking, what family is a bear in?
The Ursus, is that an Ursus family? Ursus horribilis is the Latin name for the grizzly bear. And Ursus, I think it's the Ursus family. Gosh, are you guys just trying to stump me here? Well, I thought this was a primary program for younger children. I'm getting some, I know younger children can have great questions too.
There's so many things to know about animals. That's the other interesting thing. And so many things that we can wonder about animals. Like, especially, I did see another question about noises that animals may come in. And it's really, really interesting. And sometimes we don't always know ourselves. But there's lots of ways to look that up and search, because there's lots of different types of scientists and even just people who love animals who go watch them. Like, there's lots of bird watchers who have spent lots of time recording different bird sounds, bird scientists, ornithologists, and even just people who just are very enthusiastic about birds, who have written down lots and lots of information about birds. So you bet you could go find some more information in lots of different places. The internet can be one place, but also lots of interesting books and things like that about birds and different animals.
One thing I will say about a sound that I've heard that is really intense is the sound of a cougar can make. And I've heard it in the night when I was camping, and it is a really intense sound, sort of like a screechy woman screaming type of sound. That's a pretty intense sound that you might hopefully won't hear, because it's not actually, well, it's super cool and exciting and a little bit scary.
All right, and actually, I think it is that time. It's 11, so we should wrap up for today. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us. And thank you, Rita, for sharing your great presentation with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Christine, for having me, and cbeen. And yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic summer out there learning and enjoying the beautiful world that we live in. So thanks so much.
All right, thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay.